multiple reasons why a woman might not feel that she's in a place to ask or to make that request. So.
Can I? I'm so sorry to single you out, the man back here. Are you? Yes, you.
Me?
Yes, you. Don't be nervous. What's your name, darling?
My name is Ronell.
Ronell.
Yes.
Did you hear? Did you understand what she was saying?
I absolutely understand.
Would you? Do you have anything to say about that?
Oh, well, I'm originally from South Africa, and in Africa, AIDS is very prevalent. And what I found is she's absolutely correct from what she's saying, because oftentimes African women would they get married really young, so they stay in marriage for a really long time, and oftentimes their husband leaves home to work far away because they go to the biggest city. So their husband he probably will have someone else there because they go long term. And they would come home and pass that on to their wives. Because in South Africa, like many African women, believe that if you're married, then there's no need to use a condom. Because that's your husband, you should trust him. But that happens, so I absolutely understand where she's coming from. Because that's something very prevalent in South Africa, and that's the reason why they have so many, like, the high rate of HIV. Also, what's a common misconception about the girls or people in general about HIV and AIDS, because the education or the awareness level is not as high as it is in like Africa, for example, is the awareness. Like, people don't understand that HIV has the potential to be AIDS. Yes, HIV can be treated, but in the long run, it eventually turns into AIDS. And people don't think that they can catch AIDS. They think that just because I have HIV, I'm not gonna die. You know, that's like, I think, the biggest misconception. Also, with married men who travel outside, I think just because I have HIV doesn't mean if I pass it on to my wife, she's not gonna die. You know, that's what they think it is. So I agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Education.
In reference to your point in talking about the shift in society and in the power dynamics that exist today, I think that back then, let's say when you're thinking about more traditional sense where women would be homemakers and men would go out and be the providers, there was a little bit of a different dynamic in how that the relationship played. There were more clear set roles that men and women assumed in some way, shape, or form, and that kind of worked itself out. But I think today what's happened, as you're talking about, is that women are now the breadwinners. They're supporting families, oftentimes without a father or a male figure in the picture. They are, buying the bacon, making the bacon, frying it, cleaning it up afterwards. And there's so many different roles that women have assumed that, yes, it is a shift. And I think that now it's kind of like some men might react to that in a certain way and feel like, okay, so now she's no longer this submissive person who would cater to me, so to speak. And there are men who, I agree with you, look for that. They want to be with a woman who would, not challenge them, like we're talking about safer sex, and just, accept whatever it is that whatever terms and conditions they would want in a relationship. But I think that in moving with the times and in moving with the trend, like, we need to just sort of accept the society as a whole. And I think that the more that women continue to do this, the more that we'll continue to push the envelope in this direction. Is that, we really need to start, and if we haven't started, continue to push to take ownership of our sexuality and what that looks like. Because I think we're doing it in other areas. Women are going to school. Women, in fact, are getting more higher education degrees than men are. Men are still making more money, but that's a whole other forum. But I think that, in this particular area, like, why is it that we're still feeling when it comes to sex, when it comes to the bedroom, we're going to put that on someone else?
Do you believe that these empowered women say that they are in a relationship? Say, like, this empowered woman, she's in a relationship, and yet she still somehow she's in a committed relationship, or say she's married, she's married in a committed relationship, and somehow she still seems to contact the infection. Although she's been like, she's always like had strength in herself, and she's like, her husband admired that at first, but now I suppose he's become wary of that. Do you believe because of this empowerment, it may have made him want to cheat?
I think cheating or being monogamous is irrelevant. I think whether you decide to have sex with one person or 500 people, it's not really the point per se, personally. If you're having protected sex, even if you're going outside of the marriage, there's a disconnect and there's something that's happening that is causing people to become infected with the virus. People can have sex in zero discordant relationships. my partner doesn't necessarily need to be negative or positive. That's, I mean, I could be in a relationship with someone who's positive the same way I could be in a relationship with someone who's negative. Now, if I'm being protected in my relationship, and I think that that's what's happening, that if people are not seeing it as, you know, if I'm going to have sex with whoever it is that I'm going to have any kind of relations with, I need to be protected, whether it's oral or it's anal or vaginal. And I think that that's what's driving the epidemic. It's this kind of like lackadaisical attitude about sex and thinking that we're moving on from this, into a more intimate situation where I don't need to negotiate this anymore, where it's no longer a topic of conversation. So I think really that's the underlying force. The fact that a person goes outside of a monogamous relationship should not mean that someone contracts HIV.
Okay, thank you.
Can I chime in here as a man? I'm sorry.
This is a women's forum.
I just feel like I want to chime in. First of all, much like when we talk about HIV, and you don't have HIV negative and positive people in the room, I don't know how you can have a women's forum and not have men. And when you talk about in the whole context of that, right? So
Because we're talking about
I
like how,
understand that. I
as
understand that.
women who have sex with men, it's not necessarily about the men or the women. Or as the women who have sex, we're contacting or we're being infected with HIV, and how we should prevent ourselves from doing that.
I totally get that. I just wanted to say this. So, when you talk about women's empowerment, right, and trust, how does a woman tell her husband and or boyfriend that
Or girlfriend.
or girlfriend
Or
to
wife.
introduce a condom into the relationship, especially when you're married, right? And you don't want to be accusatory or your husband or your boyfriend or whoever they are and say that I suspect that you are cheating on me or going outside of our relationship. How you can be empowered and still not? That's a really tough thing to introduce into a relationship. And I just wanted to know people.
So his did y'all hear his question?
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was with my ex-husband I was married for about 7 years. I was with him for almost 10 years. After that initial beginning few months, I can't even recall now, we moved on to having unprotected sex for the entire duration of our relationship. It's very difficult because it's kind of like, okay, so this is my husband and I'm assuming that I'm the only person, right? And he's assuming that I'm the only person. So that conversation doesn't really come up. So it's kind of like this weird thing. So should I be asking my husband to put on a condom? I don't know. Do I know of people that have been married to someone and become infected with HIV due to the other person, one of the parties having gone outside of the relationship? I do. So I think it's very difficult to kind of like grasp this, but I guess underlining, I would like to think if I'm in a committed relationship with someone and we're both negative, let's say, and we know that we're sleeping only with one another, I would hope to God that if my partner goes out, they are as safe as possible. To me, I think the worst thing would be for the person to go out and not be safe and to potentially add a different element to the relationship, more so than even the fact of them having cheated.
But we know that
Per se.
happens. We know that happens. We had Tiger Woods when we during his big scandal. The reports were that he was having unprotected sex with all these women, and we know that there were a lot of women. And he's married.
And if I was Tiger Woods' wife, that would, to me, that whole piece would have been the biggest violation of all.
I agree.
But that's what they're doing. They're doing it.
I think it was an excellent question that you asked. I think that
Still a woman's forum.
being married is really different than starting a relationship. So for myself and what I tell my clients is that you have to introduce the condom in the beginning.
Right.
You can't have sex with somebody 8 times and then say, oh, by the way, I forgot the condom. Can we use it now? It kind of doesn't go that way. You either have to do it in the beginning and be consistent until you decide that you're going to change that and make a different decision. But once you're married, it does become difficult. Like, it just, I don't know what the statistics are, but I don't think very many married people are using
We're asking
condoms.
that question.
And especially if they weren't using condoms to kind of introduce it later because you think they're cheating. But I think the bigger question becomes if you think that your partner is cheating,
You're cheating.
you have to kind of go in a little bit, like, I think you're cheating, and that the ramifications for that can be really great. So what are we going to do about this? I don't want to use a condom. So, like, do we want to get tested? Do we not want to get tested? Do we want to have a further conversation? Why am I feeling insecure? What are you giving me that I'm feeling insecure? What am I feeling? Like, it's a whole psychosocial, emotional conversation that needs to go on. But I agree that if you don't introduce the condom at the door, introducing it later on becomes really, really difficult.